Hey everyone, Brendan Snyder here. How are you? Thank you so much for joining me and welcome to a special review for the brand new Cult album, Under the Midnight Sun. I'm super excited about this. It is their 11th studio album. And yes, you just saw me holding up an LP. I will be getting the CD too because you guys know I'm a CD lover. But starting off with the LP here, got it a little bit early. Release date for this is October 7th of 2022. But I got to dive into it a bit early, which is why you're also getting this review a bit early here. And so a lot to go through and we'll do that in just a moment. But if you're new to my channel and you haven't already hit the subscribe button, please click the button. Also leave a comment, hit like, all those things help support my channel. I greatly appreciate it. And of course, as an added bonus, by subscribing, you will be able to stay up to date on all that's going on in the world of music, just like this with a special review of the brand new Cult album, Under the Midnight Sun. So I'm going to jump back as I always do. I want to give a little bit of history here because it does tie into what we're going to talk about with this album. And so the Cult itself proper formed in 1983. And of course, that means that they're getting ready to celebrate their 40th anniversary next year. And what better way to do it than putting out brand new music? To me, that's the best thing to do for an anniversary, put out some new music, and that's what they're doing here. So pretty cool. But prior to the Cult proper forming in 1983, they were known as Death Cult, which grew out of Southern Death Cult. And the first incarnations of Southern Death Cult actually got their start in 1981. So the band is actually a bit older than, what we were just saying, which they're about to have their 40th anniversary as the Cult. But, if you want to go off of the earlier incarnations of the band, they've already had their 40th anniversary. So take it for what you will. And of course, the band's debut album, Dreamtime, came out in 1984, followed by Love in 1985. And of course, their two biggest albums being Electric from 1987 and Sonic Temple in 1991. And, out of all 11 of these albums that they have made, if you add in the two that were done by Death Cult and Southern Death Cult, it actually makes this one here lucky number 13. So I'm looking at it that way, setting it apart a bit. And the part of the reason that I wanted to tell you about the little bit of history there with that earlier mention of those first two albums is that Billy Duffy, in a number of early interviews while recording the album, he kept saying that this album itself, Under the Midnight Sun, was a throwback or a combination of Dreamtime and Love. Personally, I don't hear it. This album here is slower and darker than that, but I'm not really hearing it. Perhaps you will when you check it out, and that's cool. But let's talk about this album specifically. As I mentioned, it is their 11th studio album, because we're not really counting Southern Death Cult and Death Cult in there. But Under the Cult, it's the 11th studio album, and first new music for them in 6 years. Hidden City 2016, which you can actually see right there at the bottom. Been a long time since they put that out, so really waiting for this. Now the thing is, this is only 8 tracks and 35 minutes long on it, and that's got me going right off the bat on this, because to me 8 songs does not make an album, neither does 35 minutes. Although I know if we go back to albums from the 60s and 70s, that's a full length of an album. So we're gonna have that argument another time on here, but I really do wish that this album was a bit longer. Now the album itself feels split into 2 sides, and that's not just because I'm starting out listening to it on vinyl. I really feel that the first 4 songs that are on here differ from the second 4 songs on here. They're very, very different, and maybe that's intentional. Maybe that's why there's only 8 tracks. Maybe that's why it's set up the way that it is on here. I'd like to think that they're doing it intentionally, at least. The first side of the album, the first 4 tracks on here, rock much more than the second side of the album, which is more orchestral in nature, both in terms of sound and atmosphere on it. And initially, that was a little off-putting to me on it, but I've warmed up to that. I really now see the 2 halves of this as one, or the whole. It's 2 halves of a whole, I really should say. And it's sort of like the relation between the sun and moon, and I think Ian would appreciate that reference here, that each side draws from the other one, making, what it does better because of what comes from the other side on it. So you got the one side that's a little slower and darker, and you got the other one's a little more rock and brighter, if you want to call it that. But, you know, two halves of the whole coming together to make the better, bigger piece that it is, that this album is, Under the Midnight Sun. And so that said, you know, the album is not really what I was expecting from the Cult. And it has taken quite a few listens to really get me to warm up to it. But now that I have to say that I'm really enjoying this album. And that's kind of why I had to set this thing up here. I needed you to kind of know where I was coming from on it. Because I do believe that if you give this album a chance, it will grow on you. It's one of those kind of albums that doesn't immediately click, you know, right out of the gate, but it does with each listen. And let's talk, you know, briefly about our two key members here, Ian Astbury on vocals and Billy Duffy. Ian, you know, is as amazing as ever on this. He's lost nothing. I mean, the guy keeps aging and he just keeps sounding the same. I think he's doing an amazing job on this. So if you're a huge Ian fan like I am, you're going to love this album. And then you got Billy Duffy on here. The man just is sharp and fierce as ever with the riffing and stuff that he does, and it's just pure all over this album here. So, of course, you put those two guys together, no matter what they churn out, it's going to sound like a Cult album because of it, even when it's not what you expected. So let's move into talking about some of the songs that are on here. Track number 1, Mirror. This one here kicks off into high gear right away. It is a rocker. It's a fantastic start to the album, and it carries very well into the second track that's on this album called A Cut Inside. And this one here was the second single released to promote the album, so maybe you've heard it's also a rocker on here. And track 3, Vendetta. This one here is the closest one to that early material like on Dreamtime because of its keyboard-laden sound. So when I heard that song on here and I thought I was really going to hear an album worth of songs like track number 3, Vendetta. When you hear that one, you'll know what I'm talking about in terms of the reference back to the early stuff on it. Track 4, Give Me Mercy. That was the lead single off of this, and in my opinion, it is still the best track on the album. I don't think that's just because I've heard it more than any other track on here, because of course I was listening to the singles before getting the album itself, but it does have the most cult-like sound to it, mostly due to guitarist Billy Duffy and his playing on it, and the lead work that he does, and so forth, really bringing it home. But after multiple repeated listens, that is still the song that jumps out to me and just totally makes sense as to why they released it as the lead single. Now moving into the second side of this thing, track 5, Outer Heaven. I think this song is a hidden gem of a song. It's got beautiful orchestration on it. It works really well to elevate the whole of the song with that orchestration. But what's really cool about it with that second side and those 4 songs and so forth, it creates a bookend to the second side. You know, it's this one being the starting, and the last track, track number 8, which is the title track, Under the Midnight Sun, another beautifully orchestrated song. So you got these 2 other more acoustic, sort of rock-driven ones in the middle there, but you've got the 2 orchestral ones bookending it, which again, I think is why this album feels like it's split into 2 different sides. Personally, I would have loved to have heard an entire album with orchestration throughout, but perhaps that's something they'll do down the road for another thing. So let's look at this. Here's the cover of this thing. It does not say The Cult anywhere on it. It also does not say that anywhere on the back of this, nor does it list any of the songs. I don't know if the CD will be any different, but the vinyl certainly doesn't have that. It does have the markings on the spine there. You do get to see The Cult and Under the Midnight Sun and so forth, but that is our cover. I love the snake and the sun there with that. We open it up here and we get the initials of it, Under the Midnight Sun there. That is the first little bit there, but still nowhere does it say The Cult. And then we have the sleeve, and we pull that out. We get some stuff here about the album itself. There's your track listing. You got to pull the sleeve out to get to it. Then you get this on the other side. There's no photos of the band members anywhere in here. I was a little bummed by that. I like to get band shots and stuff like that, a little something, at least one picture. Nothing here. Now this is beautiful. I chose to pick up the one that is the white vinyl. I really like this. Check that out. It's beautiful. Very thick, very nice, well done in terms of that aspect of things. So there you go. That is the album itself, and sort of bottom line on this thing. While this is not an album that I was expecting, at least what I had in my mind when I was listening to the interviews and hearing what Billy and Ian were saying about it and what they were working on, I think, like most cult albums, it has forged its own path, and simply by its differences and the diversity that is on this album itself, it has made itself its own cult album. So not sounding like other cult albums in and of itself has made it its own, worthy addition to the catalog, in my opinion. And it's really grown on me in these repeated listens, and it's going to continue to be on repeated listens because of that, because now that I've really kind of dived into this thing and it in turn has sort of sucked me in with it. And as I said, it's not an immediate album out of the gate. It's a little slower and brooding kind of an album that builds with each listen, but I do think it's worth it, in my opinion, and I think you should give it a chance, see what you think, and perhaps you too will enjoy it as much as I am. And there you go. That is the Cult Under the Midnight Sun, brand new 11 studio album review. For related videos, I will leave a link in the description to the Cult Sonic Temple 30th Anniversary Edition. If you want to check that out, a box set, 4 CD box set edition of it, I go through that. And if you've enjoyed this video, consider sharing it out on social media. Help spread the word that way. I would also greatly appreciate it. All right, everyone, take care, have a good one, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.